Finally, the last thing we're going to be talking about in this ethics portion is business ethics on the global level. We're going to discuss about a little bit, a few of the things to be aware of when you're talking about ethics and how it may be impacted by different things that are going on around the world. And the first thing I want to just reference a little bit is you got to think about ethics in relations to how a company's particular code of conduct or a particular way that they want to operate ethically clashes a lot of times with local customs. So, for example, um, you may have a situation where um, um, you have women in the role that they play in local societies and business. Not all businesses operate in the United States, right? Businesses have international presence. And that can include countries where, for example, women are just simply treated differently. How does a company deal with that? Does the company decide that they're going to simply tell the female employees in their company that they're going to have to adhere to the local customs and basically just live with it? On the other hand, are they going to want to try to change or make exceptions for their female employees? Or possibly they'll say, look, we're not going to operate in that country if they're not going to be able to treat women equally. This is one of the important things that companies always have to deal with. And again, I'm presenting to you because there's no clear-cut answer. There's no simple solution to this. But it is something that companies need to be aware of so that they can deal with it proactively. What kind of policies are they going to want to have in place to deal with that? Um, Another big issue, and this is something that people often talk about, how do we deal with conditions of foreign suppliers, right? Nikes, for example, tennis shoes. We all love to buy Nikes and we all love to buy them at an affordable price. But the fact that Nike pays their employees in a foreign country a less than minimum wage here in the United States, how does that impact the company? You know, companies may use child labor. In other countries, it may be legal for, say, a 13-year-old to work on an assembly line. And obviously, that 13-year-old may not be working in the best conditions possible. How do we deal with that? You know, some companies, they get around things by saying, well, products are assembled in the United States where, you know, our employees are paid good prices and where they're treated well and where they have benefits. Well, that's great, but maybe the supplies, the actual raw material that goes into constructing that kind of product is created in a country where, frankly, you may not have great labor conditions, or they're not being paid very well, or where there's a lot of issues regarding how the workers are being treated locally by the government or by the company. It's, again, no simple answers, right? It's very difficult. You're balancing also the issue of consumers. You know, people don't want to pay extra for a product. That's why these companies are making the product overseas in the first place. The idea is that they're going to offer a product for a cheaper price than their competitor who may make the product in the United States. And so there's always these different types of considerations that go into being, and you're always going to have companies dealing with these. That's why, again, many companies try to create rules of ethics to try to figure out what is acceptable to them. Maybe it may be acceptable that they don't necessarily pay great wages to their workers in a foreign country, but they don't want child labor. You know, where those boundaries are drawn is going to be determined by the ethics of the particular company. And it's also something that you can think about as a consumer. You know, do you want to look into the ethics of a particular company to decide whether or not they're a company that you want to do business with? Now, one of the things, and this will be on the test, by the way, one of the things that we can talk about in this regard is a law called the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. This is a federal law. And this is interesting because, you know, for a very long time, for example, it's illegal for a company to pay a bribe to, say, a local official. So, you know, let's say the company runs a restaurant, okay, Applebee's. Applebee's get inspected by food inspectors, right, from the city of El Paso. They go in to make sure that the establishment is clean and that there's no issues regarding health. You know, employees washing their hands, the product is kept refrigerated and clean in a storeroom. What would happen if they show up and they find deplorable conditions and the manager gives cash to the inspector, pays a bribe? That's illegal. Clearly, no issues with that, unethical, illegal. However, what happens when the company is working overseas. Okay, what happens when you have a situation where the company is paying a bribe to an overseas official? And this all came about because of a case from the 1970s called Bananagate. Okay, and it involved a United States company, United Bananas, which market the Chiquita bananas that are still, you can still find them in your supermarket. And these bananas were being grown in Honduras, which is in Central America. Now, there, the government of Honduras was taxed every box of bananas 25 cents a quarter. So basically, every box of bananas that was going out of the country had to the producer had to pay a 25-cent tax to the government of Honduras. This raised revenues for Honduras, right? That they could spend on building roads and schools and whatever. The government decided we're going to double the tax. We're going to increase it to 50 cents, which meant that it was now twice as expensive to take a box of bananas out of Honduras than it had been. Now, for the Honduran government, this means more revenue, more money. However, for United, it meant less profits, right? Because now they're having to pay more. So what United did is they paid a bribe to the president of Honduras. And this bribe was $2.5 million. It wound up lower, and in return for the bribe, the president of Honduras, what he did is he lowered the tax from 50 cents down back to 25 cents. This wound up saving United in its first year $7.5 million in taxes. So if you think about it, this bribe was actually very smart business-wise on the part of United, because they saved $5 million, right? They paid a $2.5 million bribe, and they saved $7.5 million. And it was a bribe. It went right into the pocket of the president of Honduras. Now, the issue became that this became public. And United got a lot of bad press, so much so that on February the 3rd, 1975, Eli Black, the president of United, actually jumped out of his office on the 44th floor of the Pan Am building in New York City to his death. It was because of all the negative publicity United was getting because their company was being investigated. Now, what this led to was the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. And this law makes it illegal for a U.S. company or a member of a United States company, like an employee or an executive, to pay a bribe to a foreign official, exactly what had happened in the Bananagate scandal. So what happened there would be illegal now. If a company wants to pay a bribe to a foreign official, then it is considered illegal in the United States, and the company can be prosecuted, the person can be prosecuted, or they can be fined. It also makes it illegal not to report bribes. But here's the interesting thing, and this is why I bring it up, because of the murkiness of ethics. The law makes an exception. And by the way, that's what the law is. The law is a rule and then an exception to the rule. So here you see a rule, can't pay a bribe to a foreign official. Then you see the exception. You can't pay a bribe to a minor officials. And this is meant to facilitate a legal process. This is what is known as greasing the palm. This is what happens. Let's say you're opening a company in another country. You need to set up a warehouse. You need the local inspector to come out, inspect the warehouse, and sign off that it's good to open. Otherwise, it can't open. In a lot of other countries, guys, in order to get that inspector to come out, you gotta pay him a little bit of money. Okay, that's just the way it works. You show up at the office of the city to request an inspection. They tell you, "Oh yeah, we'll get an inspector out there in the next year or so." Right? Can't do that. You can't do it the right way. So you kind of have to say, "Okay, well, here you go. Here's $20. If you can squeeze me into your schedule and come out and visit and do your inspection, in the next few days as opposed to next year." That kind of bribe is illegal under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Now, some people might say, well, wait a minute, it's wrong to bribe these public officials in any way, shape, or form. But here, the law creates an exception. You could say the law bends a little because there's a recognition that in other countries, that's just how things are done. Here in the United States, we generally don't do that. If you're, for example, if you're wanting to get the power the electricity of a new house. You buy a house, you want to get the electricity turned on. You're not expected to go down to the electric company and have to pay a bribe so that the guy comes on and turns on your electricity. That's not how it's done here. But it is done in a lot of other countries. And this is a direct recognition that sometimes those kinds of minor bribes have to be paid. And in order to facilitate that, and specifically to not place US companies at a disadvantage, the law makes this exception. Big bribes to foreign officials to get things like taxes dropped or to, to do something like that, not allowed. But a minor bribe to make it basically easier to do something that the company should already be getting, like an inspection or the power turned on or something like that, that's okay. Interesting because of this dilemma between ethics. What is ethical and what isn't? That's what I have for the ethics section, and that's what I have for this first week. The chapters in the book that deal with this, again, are going to be chapter 1. It's going to talk about business ethics. The paralegal ethics stuff is things that, as I mentioned before, are not in the book. But this is going to be the material for the first week. After this week, we're going to be jumping into actual contracts with an overview overall of what contracts looks like. Thank you.